Hello, welcome back. I hope you all are doing well. I wanted to obviously talk about what's going on in the energies, and to know that we're in a time of massive, I want to say tribulation, but okay. So it gets challenging because I have these ideas in my head of things I want to speak to, and then the energies come in and they start showing me some different interpretations. It's really about these tribunal energies. Many meanings to that because we're talking about the tribes of origin, but also the energies that are being taken out, right? So this oppression through the fields in terms of, I've just come to call it really comes through from my perspective as like a foreign or an alien energy. And again, I hate using words because they conjure up these images and ideas. And I never mean them in a strictly kind of one-to-one translation as to how we interpret the linguistics naturally. But it does come through that way as being an alien trafficking of the human form. People will say human trafficking, but I feel a little bit differently than that. And what I start to see are all these energies of control that we have been under. It's like all of these kind of ideas of borders, passports, stamps, seals, registration, ID numbers, tracking movement, right? So definitely about these individuals who have incarnated into specific origins. We're talking about ancestry, DNA, bloodlines, lineage, this kind of thing, whose movements are being watched. But even in saying this, I know this can conjure up in a lot of people this sense of like, oh my God, is something following me? How do I stop this from happening? And it's that, yes, but to understand, first and foremost, it's about the awareness of it, right? So when we have the awareness, then we can come into our own space and feel where that's actually happening and to say no to it. In its most basic, this is how I work with energy, but the tricky part is recognizing it, because we have become so accustomed to this control energy being in our field, thinking this is who we are, this is our personality, this is our existence, this is the way we've always been, taking these on as character traits, and in many ways, a lot of times, taking these energies on as something that we are proud of, especially when it comes to highly empathic, sensitive souls. We think these are good qualities, right? I'm always there to help someone. I'm there at the drop of a hat, right? I'm the guy that people call to take care of shit, to get shit done. But that's not our role. These are the things that we have been tricked in. We've been tricked into compliance with these roles, with these rules, with these laws. These are not the laws of origin. These are not the laws of source. We've somehow stumbled into this where it sort of matched who we felt we were, right? To be helpful and to be of service. And so it felt like this fits. This is what I should be doing. And yet those are energies that are laced with distortion, right? Because then we're coming into places where we're trying to lift people up. We're constantly trying to help them as we slowly succumb to this disease, illness, destruction, exhaustion, things just spinning out of control in our own lives. And we don't understand because we think, well, I'm doing everything I should be, right? I'm helping people. I'm trying to not create bad karma in my life. And yet everything just seems to be spiraling downward, right? So this is where we have to take a step back. And this is where I'm saying it can be really tricky. energy is as simple as recognizing where it's at and saying no to it. But if we have taken on the distortion as our identity, as being these helpful, humble beings, then we're never going to get out of it, right? So the first thing is to actually see and be able to admit that this is what's happening. But this is really challenging if we have really allowed our ego to become this identity. So I'm going to be switching subjects a little bit here. I feel like as I was coming in, I'm talking to a bunch of different people. So there's lots of parts and pieces here, and it may not seem like it flows in the video, and that's okay. So take what fits for you, of course, and throw the rest out. So the other thing we want to talk about, which is coming up very strongly, is the Divine Mother distortion. For a long time, we were talking about the dark feminine, right? The dark feminine is the energy that has taken on the distorted mother code and created an identity, a personality, an archetype out of that. Most often we see this through these healers, right? But energies where we are looking to another and saying, oh wow, there's a part of that that fits for me, but also something's a bit off, right? So it's the dark feminine in the sense of, like, let's say there's different levels that we relate to, right? Even like generationally. So Divine Mother is like a mother energy, right? So it's a bit, I don't want to say above, but like it's a different range of energy. Divine Feminine would be meeting us where we are, right? So it could be colleagues, it could be coworkers, or like I said, it's like people that we go to for assistance in our lives to forward through our mission, this kind of stuff. We would see them as like sisters and brothers, let's say. And yet they are a step down from the Divine Mother code. I know this, just bear with me. The reason I'm bringing that up is because we've been working so much with this dark Divine Feminine, right? We had to come in here to see all of this before we could see the root of where that dark Divine Feminine comes from. So the dark Divine Feminine has taken the distorted mother code and made, it almost comes through as making a living out of it. And so for those of you who have been, let's say, subjected to this distortion, you'll understand even the symbology and those words of how this plays out. So with the Divine Mother code, when it's in its distortion, this is where, I would also say this is the base code in empaths and the source light origin beings, where they feel they have come into this realm, into this earth, in order to serve humanity, to help humanity, to lift humanity up, right? And we've talked about this before, where that's not actually our role. But I see the energy field as being a sphere with these tandem codes, right? We are, our energy field has this base structure, which is an exact replication of what the earth is as well. And there's a difference between the earth, Gaia, this mother goddess, Divine Mother code, and the land itself. So when we come into this realm, we almost, it's like we're given this passport or these papers, right? Like, this is what you're supposed to connect to. This is who you're supposed to be. It's a distorted Divine Mother code, which instead of being there as a foundation, as Mother Earth, Divine Mother is, right, here to support you in your growth, we think we're supposed to come in through the distortion and lift others up, support others in their growth. But how does that tend to play out? It tends to play out in that we end up taking on the burden of other energy fields, of other people, right? So Divine Mother, the true organic code, is here in its source origin, right? So in that sense, she's here to support the growth as a resonance field, right? So connecting into that, you attune to the truth of what your source energy is. And that in and of itself is continual clarification, continual cleansing, right? Just as the earth body is able to cleanse itself through the cycles of nature, right? It's naturally occurring. There's a reason that it's able to do that. That's what the Divine Mother does for us. And yet we are trying to be the Divine Mother to other beings, and we cannot possibly be that through this distortion. So what tends to happen is we misidentify as an empath as being distorted Divine Mother, thinking we're here to uplift, we're here to do the heavy lifting, we're here to do the burden work. And that's not the case. And this is where a lot of the confusion comes in, right? So, but it also plays out in nature as well. So what I've been being shown is that there's Earth, this sphere energy field, and then the distortion comes in and it follows those still points, right? Those areas in the land that we have identified as being sacred spaces. But the dark comes in behind and they create the grid. They create these, it's really structures in order to deaden that vibration. Now we think, oh, still point, it conjures up this idea that there is no vibration, but it's source vibration, right? There's no charge to it. It feels very, very neutral. But what happens is that, we'll just say it's government, right? It's like this ruling body over the planetary field in the land that takes this energy and deadens it. So it becomes like you cannot connect in to the true organic resonance vibration, which is purity, which is stillness. It's that love, it's that joy, true connection, clear channel without any distortion in it. And yet what we're finding is that there's many, many layers of this, right? So if you can imagine Divine Mother as being this sphere, what we see in the physical reality is actually an overlay over that sphere. So unconsciously, subconsciously, we are connecting into the physical matter that we see as nature and saying, this is nature, this is divine code. And then we're getting stuck into these deadened spaces in the land. When in fact, if you can imagine what you're actually seeing with your physical eyes as nature is not the divine code. The divine code is within. The physical matter state formulates around that, but that doesn't necessarily mean now what's in the physical matter state is still emanating divine code. We would like to think, especially in nature, that is what's happening, right? But it's really to shift your perception that, okay, when I'm going out into nature, I'm not here to necessarily connect to what I see as being the tree or the land or the water or the river. It's the divine code around which the matter state has been built, right? Because that matter state has been messed with through the land. So I've started speaking in that way, and I was being shown this very strongly through someone else's field as well, that you have to like differentiate between what is Earth source code and what is the land, which we typically, let's just say through our human being, are like, oh yeah, we need to get outside, we need to get in nature. It's not the physicality of that you need to connect to, right? It's that light code within, which you do connect to through your physical form, right? So it's a bit of like a mind, moving things around a little bit. But we'll hear people talk about like, oh, grid work and connecting to these things. And to me, it's actually a lot of distortion going on there. So just know, I used to struggle with this, right? Because I'm like, I know nature's supposed to be really good for me, and yet I go out there and I just feel like I'm connecting to all this crapola that's out there, right? So to know there's different layers, and I just see these things because we're coming into this time now where so much is being revealed through the energy fields, right? And so a lot of us are struggling with this sense of, okay, what do I know and what is actually true? Well, you are getting that divine impulse to connect, right? And so when you do go to connect, though, you feel this weirdness and you're like, am I wrong? Like, do I not know what I'm doing? Can I not trust my intuition? It's not that you don't know what you're doing, but what you've been shown, what you've been trained to, let's say, assimilate in your mind to being energy is not actually what you're seeing out there, right? So to follow what you are feeling, it is there, but we kind of have to sweep away again all that we have been trained to believe and to understand. So that's coming up very strongly through the earth ranges over these last few weeks. In the physical human form, we also run into distorted Divine Mother. And again, if we say, okay, sisters, brothers, same level, we can use the parents or the mother, right, to understand how this plays out through human beings. So part of the, again, it's this, there is a purity there, but then there is also that distortion that can be created through there. So of course, if we think of our mothers, protectors, teachers, lovers, right? They love us into existence. But a lot of us will struggle with this because there's also, we feel into the distortion, right? And then we start saying things like, well, why don't I love my mother? Like, what's wrong here? I know she wants the best for me. I know she does. But then I feel these things, and then I'll say these things, and she'll do these things. And like, I know that's not right. So there's confusion, which leads to shame, which leads to guilt, which eventually leads to anger, resentment. And then in its worst form, there's this being incredibly almost stubborn, right? So resisting wholeheartedly what is coming from the mother. And then we're like, I'm an awful child because I feel this way about these things. When in fact, what is actually happening, you're playing out the distortion in the field, right? So understanding in its distortion, we can relate this to kind of the narcissistic behavior, right? What happens here, and the reason our mothers is like one of the most challenging relationships we will ever have. Also noticing, right, with the earth, we're so challenged as empaths because we're actually connecting to the wrong thing. We think we're here to be this, to connect to this, when in fact we're not. We're here to serve our own field, the source lights. Doing so allows us to shine in our truth. That is what emanates out to others. Being in the presence of our source emanation is what allows them to change, gives them permission to change, because they see you vibrating at that level and they want what you have. But it's not that you have to give it to them and give it away so that you are within depletion. It's that they attune, they learn, their field raises up to that level as a result of being in your presence. Through the distortion, if we're not aware, we let people in and they actually come in to take our light and bring us down, right? So we're having to really, really refine our understanding through our knowing, through our feelings, through trusting what we really feel, even though there is so much, let's say, evidence in the physical to the contrary of all of this. So when we look at distorted Divine Mother, this is how it plays out. Most typically, right? The mother wants to be in control, right? So this is distorted control, normally here to support the growth as a foundation, but thinking she knows all, right? Thinking she knows the way things should be. So when she sees something she doesn't agree with, she says, it must be this way, right? So trying to control the atmosphere, trying to control the situation, trying to control the outcome. But the problem is this can come through in very, very subtle ways, right? So it's not overtly out there. So this is already where the confusion starts, because we're like, well, she's not yelling at me, she's not being mean, but she's saying like, you need to go do this, or I need you to do that, or something's going on in my life and I'm feeling really bad, and yet we're having an icky feeling. Right away we start to feel guilty that we're having this resistance to that energy, and we're like, what's wrong with me? I'm an awful person. She's just saying whatever, and I'm like, getting sick and like, I don't even want to answer the phone. I don't want to be around that. I don't even want to go over there, right? Kind of thing. But that's because what's being said through the mouth is just a small part of the underlying energy that's actually happening. It's a controlling energy that's coming through. Distorted source code. It's control rather than presence. So then what happens as you start to interact, and perhaps you're coming in and you're saying, okay, well, you know what we could do to solve your problem? Like, let's do this. Or how about, have you ever thought of that? So you're coming in with your source code into this distortion. The distortion says, oh no, and immediately comes down on it, right? So suddenly you're feeling like, okay, I'm coming in to help, and now I'm feeling like I'm not being heard. I'm perhaps feeling like I'm being taken advantage of. Like, now I'm spending my time and my energy. I want to help what's showing up here. But now I'm like, why did I even show up here? Because I'm like, everything I have to say is being discredited, discounted. It's not valid. Like, I know more than you do, right? And then when you try to reason with that, this energy suddenly turns into, now it's over here and it's saying, poor me. Like, then it starts to play the martyr, right? Which is like, you don't understand how hard it is for me because blah, blah, blah. Or they literally start crying in tears, right? Like, what? And then then a new story comes out. It's like, well, do you know what so-and-so did to me? And this is why I feel this way. And like, I just can't because all these things from the past, right? And so suddenly you're over here addressing the first energy that was put out. And when the distortion says, and basically what the distortion is saying, oh no, I'm not attuning to source light. I'm not going there because I've so bought into this. This is my foundation. This is who I am. This is my truth. Now you're coming in to heal, to correct, right? And this energy is saying it's freaking out because it doesn't know how to handle it. It doesn't even understand its wounding. It doesn't know that anything is wrong because it has built its life on the distortion. If you take the distortion away, they crash, they fall, right? They don't know what they're standing on in the first place. And you're shining light on the distortion, which is just ultimately going to freak them out. So instead of succumbing to that, they switch over here to this platform, right? Which is to say, now I'm the victim. Now I'm the martyr. Like, how awful. So you're like, wait a minute. But I actually came in here to help, and now suddenly I'm in this position where I'm the bad guy. And then you start feeling sorry, and then you start feeling guilty, and then you start feeling ashamed, right? And the whole cycle eventually starts all over again. But you kind of crawl back away, and you beat yourself up. You retreat into your inner child. This is where the addictions start to come out. You start to drink again. Perhaps you're overeating. Perhaps you're running away and avoiding whatever might be in the house that needs to be done, or whatever, things that you had laid out for yourself, where you're like, I'm going to get my life on track. These are the things I'm going to do. This pulls you back, right? And now you're in this space of separation and you feel awful, alone, isolated, and you think it's you, but it's not. It's because you're trying to come in here and this is refusing to update and upgrade, right? And then the whole pattern repeats itself, right? This come back in, and then perhaps there's an argument or a fight, and like, this is what happens to me, right? Like, I literally have started hanging up the phone sometimes because I can't handle it. And when I do that, right, like, that's me pulling back. This energy comes back in and says, it doesn't even acknowledge it. It comes back in and it's like, in a different energy though, of like, oh, I got sidetracked, and so I'm just giving you a call back, and da 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 da, right? And so then you're like, oh, did I overreact? Maybe I overreacted. Now I feel bad. Okay, let me come back. Same cycle repeating, right? They're like, look at this though. They're extending this invitation for you to keep coming back in and doing this. So this is where you now look at this from a distance and say, what the fuck is going on? Well, what they're doing is they're playing both sides, right? And I was like telling someone the other day, it's like but you can't do both. They actually don't go together, and this is what's so confusing about it, right? You're either in control or you're playing the victim. You can't do both, but these individuals will do both as a way to manipulate, right? So they have two places they can go. If they don't like what they're getting over here, they flip over to this and you follow them, right? This is where you have to start to understand where, did I just like bless you? Where you are, what is your role? Where do you keep falling into this, right? And it doesn't mean you have to have this awful, dragged out conversation, fight, argument. You just need to pull back your energy and to know for your own self, okay, this is the pattern that keeps repeating. When I get that phone call this time, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to step back, or I'm going to go in as an investigator and I'm going to see, okay, at what point does my body actually start to go like this, where I start to feel the deception, right? All right, so this takes us into the mind program. The reason we continue to play out these behaviors, well, we were basically born into them, right? Like, our mothers didn't get to be the way they are because we were born to them. They were already that way. So if you can imagine, it's like if that's what you have always lived with, you actually don't know any other way. You don't know that it can be better than that, right? And so you spend your life thinking it's your fault. Of course, this is what happens when we're children, right? The world revolves around us. It must be my fault that my parents are angry, because that's what we see, right? We do something and they react, and therefore it must be us. We don't know anything outside of ourselves. But what we need to realize is that these are patterns. What do we mean by that? Those are electrical impulses in the body. So when I'm looking out, and I go back to my dog now, right? Because this is also helping me to be able to explain this in a bit of a more like realistic, rational way. If I were to see a German Shepherd, right? My unconscious, subconscious reaction is one of, I need to feel this animal out, right? Because of things in my past that I've been exposed to, which started and created this pattern of me having this internal reaction I didn't even realize I was having, right? So it's like the mere image of that triggers something in me that I wasn't even aware of, right? So the same thing is going on with the mother. It's like just seeing her name, or like just one word makes you like go like this, and you don't even know it, and you don't know that there can be a different way, and you don't know what happens until things actually start to spiral out of control, right? This is the gift of things falling apart, is that it allows us to see what the hell is going on underneath the cover of all of this distortion, right? So until I've really been forced now having these issues with the dog, and it's not the dog, it's that dog is here to help me to clean up what's going on inside of me, right? And I'm very, very much aware of that, and that's why I keep pushing through. I'm like, okay, now I'm doing private lessons. I'm like, please put me in a room with 50 dogs with my dog so that I can figure out what it is within myself I need to get under control, right? I'm very aware that that's what's happening here. And that he is just a tool and a messenger, really. He's here to help. Bless his heart. But, right, this is the part that we have to start to see for ourselves. And we have to acknowledge this. And this is where we kind of have to step back and step into our maturity and stop saying, woe is me, I'm an awful person, the world is out to get me. Because it's not. The world right now is here to show you where you've been trapped in the distortion and in these patterns, right? It's not here to punish you. It's here, please open your eyes and see what we are trying to show you in all of this, what you are perceiving to be pain, right? And frustration and all these things where it feels like the world is just coming down on you right now. It's not. It's here to open up. It's here to blow the cover off of the program that has been running your life. So, all right. The mind programs. Okay, so I just have to stop my video. For some reason, it only goes for like a half an hour, and then I have to restart it. Okay, so the mind programs. Now, I spent a better part of last year, maybe the last 2 years, really wrestling with this. And I had no idea what was really going on. I thought I was really just going crazy insane. But so what started to happen, and I will say the reason I first became aware of this is because I had a session and I was saying to the woman, like, I don't even remember what I told her, but I was telling her something and she's like, oh, there's like this energy around you. And so she went in and she's like, okay, let's clear this, da da da. Didn't really think anything of it, except the next day when I woke up, it's like I finally woke up into silence. But the crazy thing about it was that I didn't even realize this stuff was going on in my mind. I was just waking up every day kind of beating myself up and like, oh God, look, you woke up late again. All these things that you had planned. And like, how are you going to get to this? And like, you're so lazy. Like, why do you do this every day? It's the same thing over and over and over, right? Those messages were not there, except when it was happening, I thought it was just my own voice talking to me, right? Like the negative self-talk, like people say, this is normal. Everybody does it to themselves. What I'm starting to realize is that this is not normal. These are the programs. They have been programmed into electrical impulses, right? It's like, it was crazy because I literally woke up in complete silence that day and I was like, holy shit. You're telling me all these things I thought was me just trying to figure my day out, figure my life out, is something else outside of me. It's created through something else. Now, we can get crazy and we can say, okay, we're being targeted and it's negative aliens and artificial intelligence and mind control. And again, in this realm, these are just human labels we are putting on things to be able to understand the energy of it, right? Even with the mother, it's like, okay, at its core, it's just an energy pattern. So even looking at that, we can say, okay, it's not the person intentionally trying to do this to us. It's the underlying energy code that they are stuck to. They don't realize it either. That's why they keep doing it. This is what's so beautiful about coming in and doing this work in yourself. Once you see it in yourself, you can have more understanding and more compassion for those around you. So it's not about fixing those around you. It's about seeing it in yourself. Once you see it in yourself, you have the code. It's game over. You can go out into the world and see this happening in everyone around you, and you don't get pulled into it then, right? Because you have that understanding yourself. So come back to yourself. Notice the thoughts and patterns that are running in your mind. They're going to feel normal. It's going to feel like this is just who I am. This is what my daily routine is, right? But it started to get so intense for me. And so yes, I had that one experience, right? Those things cleared. But then there were more things that would start to come up. So what would happen is that I would be in between that sleep and awake state, right? And I could feel like all of a sudden, oh my God, these like screaming. And again, it sounded like me. It felt very normal, right? But it got so intense to the point where I was like, I could feel myself waking up not in a disturbed state, right? So I felt very comfortable, very serene. It was almost like I passed through something and all of a sudden this energy would start and it was like, you're so lazy, like, and I was like, but after this happening over and over and over again, I started to say, okay, this is where, if there is a team, if I do have energies working with me, you need to get in right here, this moment this is happening. This is what we need to look at. This is what I need to resolve. This shit is ruining my fucking life. Little by little, it actually started happening, right? I started to have these awarenesses. There started to be more of a separation between my waking moment and when that barrage of energy would come in. And then it was almost like I was having a conversation between myself, because I was like, I became so aware. And just based on my history and the sessions I've had and all the work that I've done, I've just kind of built this inner understanding that this is what's going on, right? So I'm not going to say like, oh, you're going to wake up one day and be totally aware of like, these are the programs and this is your normal mind, right? But I'm telling you, like, this is the secret. This is what I have suffered for so many years. Going through this, I realize now to be able to share this with people and to validate what you're feeling when you feel, it happens before you're going to bed too, right? Like, so you have trouble falling asleep because you're like, I'm exhausted, but I can't sleep because I'm thinking about all these things. That's not even you. That's all this crap coming in to keep you so wound up you're unable to crack through it to feel your own light, right? So the most two common times, before you're falling asleep and as you're waking up in the morning. So, and it feels like, what I've realized is that we have really these two minds, right? There's the dark programmed mind, which we actually think is who we are, which is really sad, right? But like, it's this distorted mother code. This is who we think we are. And we need to assimilate to this, right? Stop being lazy, stop being all these things that these messages tell us that we are, that we're not getting shit right in our life. And so we work harder to do this, right? So that we can think, okay, this is where, okay, now we've got it right. And now we can tell other people, like, this is the way it's supposed to be. So we think we have to overcome this and to, silence this, and the way that we silence it is to work harder. It's like, okay, let me get the better job with more money because then I'll feel safe and secure, and let me go to school, and let me, do it's like all these societal things that society keeps telling us. It's the programs in society, right? They keep telling us this is what will make a happy, functional life for you, right? And even this distorted mother tells us these things as well, right? Can't you just do this? I'm worried about you. How are you going to retire? Like, you don't have any money. And what about this, this, and that? All these things. What about your health? But yet at the same time, okay. So, but this is the distorted mind, right? You have this original code of who you are, which has actually nothing to do with this. But until you can actually see this, it's like, this is what's happening, right? You're in here. This is you, right? Like, total sleepless night, feeling totally why do you feel overwhelmed? Because this is doing this. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I sat there and I was like, okay, this shit, like, I literally woke up one day and was like, this what I'm feeling right now, like, stop it. Like, there's something going on here, right? So it's like, to notice that pattern, so that suddenly you're like, hold on a sec. What is going on here? You start to remove yourself. You start to create. All you need is like one sliver of evidence of this, right? Just let me see one crack in the code. You start to have these experiences where, and perhaps it comes through someone else, right? You're watching someone else's, because sometimes I'll get these weird, like, why was I privy to that part of the conversation? Or why did someone tell me this one thing? Right? But it's to help you crack the code. Okay, so let me tell you what that looks like. So I have a neighbor who's like in her 90s, and we share driveways, right? So essentially, like, when it snows, we shovel both driveways, right? But I only moved in a couple of years ago, so she's been in this state for quite a while, and there's a neighbor a couple houses down who helps her with the yard work, does the shoveling and the plowing, whatever she needs, kind of thing. So a couple of days ago or last week or whatever, I noticed, like, okay, her grass hasn't been getting cut. She'll either have like this neighbor come, or her son comes, or there's like a landscaping company sometimes that will come. And so I started to notice, like, it's kind of getting long, I'm like, maybe I'll just go cut. So I had finished cutting my yard and I was going to go over and start cutting hers, but my lawnmower would not start. And I was like, this is weird. I've never had this lawnmower start ever. Like, what the F, And I'm like, okay, whatever. She's like, and then she had come out in the course of all of this, and was like, well, I was going to cut your yard. She's like, well, you can use my lawnmower, but just do the front, okay? She's like, just do the front. I was like, yeah, perfect. So I cut her front yard, and then I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to do the whole thing, whatever. But like my lawnmower, she's like, oh, it's fine. We started having this conversation. It's fine. This is what we need to do for each other, is to take care of each other. And we've had this conversation so many times, right? Because the house that I live in, she, when she moved in at the time, there was an elderly woman who lived there, right? So she and her husband helped this woman with her home. And she said, basically they started this kind of trend in the neighborhood. It's like the neighbors really did not help each other out or anything. And they were really the first ones who kind of started this going on. And there's a lot more to it. But anyway, she's always told me about this and talked about it, and how we just all need to help each other, right? This is what life is about. And yes, it's become very clear, like, this is what we need, especially in light of everything that's going on. It's about taking care and having this community. around us. Except with all the distortion, it's really challenging to do that, right? Because we come into this manipulation now, because this is a conversation I was having with someone else too. It's like, we really want community, but why does community not work, right? Because we're all in so much fear of not getting what we need. We start to do all these weird things, right? To take care of ourselves, to make sure that we're in this right place. First and foremost, taking care of ourselves, right? And there is some truth to that, but we get in the physical world and it starts to take on this weird distortion. So I'm very much all for that and in agreement. And I do want to help people, but I always feel like there's a weird thing going on then. Either it's like, well, now they expect it all the time, and I'm afraid of like having these expectations that I can't meet because I've got a busy schedule or whatever it is, like, or like I'm only available at certain times, which don't correspond to, you know, timing of whatever. Like I can't cut the grass at 5 a.m, you know, kind of thing. So all this stuff starts to come up, you know, and then she says to me, you know, I'm here for you. Anything you need, I'm here for you. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. Like, you're 90 years old. It's really the other way around. Like, and I'm like, yeah, like, I wish you would call me. Like, I'm here to help, you know, but she never does. I never do. Right. So, but she made this big, like, I'm always thinking about you. And she tells me this all the time, right? Like, I pray for you and I see what you're doing. You're, you know, she's like, I know what it's like. And, kind of, I don't want to say subtle because it's not subtle. She's saying it outright, but that's as far as she goes, right? She'll just make these statements about, you know, anything you need, I'm here. Okay. So then I see her the next day and she's like, hey, the neighbor said he will fix your lawnmower. I'm like, oh, that would be great. I'm like, yeah, because that way it can help you out. You know, I don't know so she starts telling me, well, so-and-so he had an injury, right? So that's why he hasn't been around, but he said he would look at your lawnmower. I'm like, thank you so much. Like, so grateful, right? This is perfect. Although there was a part of me who was like, you know, I actually really just want to get a new lawnmower because I've been thinking I would really like to get an electric one, which is more quiet. So she's like, just put it in my garage. He'll come and get it when he has time. So he came back eventually at one point and brought my lawnmower back working. It was just some spring or something, right? No big deal. And I was like, hey, how's your injury? And he tells me, she needs to get her son up here to do that. But, you know, that's why I haven't been coming around. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I just got caught up in some massive scheme here. Like, how am I suddenly in the middle of this web, right? Which she's been like, and I've heard various parts of these stories over time. Like, he keeps saying, I need to get my son, but he has his own life. And she's thinking he's not coming up to cut her grass because he's not feeling well. And yet he's actually trying to manipulate her into getting her son. And yet she told me that she told him that she would just get a landscaping company so neither of them had to worry about, right? So it's like, what in the world did I just become a part of, right? Like, and again, I have no problem helping, but the other weird thing, right? So here's where I'm saying this is how you see the codes, because prior to this happening, there were two things that happened. I was on YouTube, and I don't normally watch tarot readers, but I'm subscribed to so much stuff, like the feeds show up and the comment, whatever. And I happened to catch this one woman saying, how she's like, yeah, she was talking about manipulation. She's like, everybody does it. She's like, how if you're going to go on vacation, you start to be extra nice to your neighbor a few weeks beforehand, so that when you go, you're like, hey, would you mind watering my garden? Like, everybody does this. And I was like, everybody does that? No wonder I don't ask for help, because then I feel like there's some weird, again, I'm feeling into the energy, not knowing what I'm actually feeling, right? I've always had this aversion to asking for help, but I realize now it's because that's what I'm feeling. It's like this, now there's a string, or now there's something you have to give back, or like, what am I actually agreeing to? Now I'm going to be beholden to something, and I didn't even know, what was happening. And that's kind of what started happening with this whole scenario with the yard. But it was weird. This was a couple weeks before this whole thing happened, and then I'm like, oh, and she was like, yeah, I'm always thinking about, like, whatever you need, you can come to me, like, I'm here for you. And I'm like, why are you being so emphatic? And now as the thing starts unraveling, I'm like, okay, she's being manipulated by this, and now she's feeling, which I understand the constraint of that. And I know when you can't do it yourself, it's hard to ask for help, and you feel like you are like subjected to everyone else's like day and time, and like it's not a good feeling, and I totally get that, right? But what's unfair is that people are not actually saying and communicating openly about what's going on and what their feelings are, because I'm sure there's some resentment coming from down the road as to, why am I having to come do this when she has an able-bodied son, right? And that's really like the root of all of this, except there's a bigger issue going on, because again, a couple weeks prior to this, there was an ambulance at her house in the middle of the night, and so I was awakened because of the lights and all this stuff going on, and I had gone out to make sure, like, is she in there alone? Like, I should just go over there. It's like the front door was wide open. I'm like, that's got to be really scary being by yourself. Well, then they all started to come out, and this neighbor came out and just kind of basically explained what had happened. And he said, well, she called me because I'm her, what's the term? Oh my God, just the POA, right? Like, oh my God, that just totally flooded my mind. Anyway, power of attorney, right? So she called him and was basically like, do whatever he needs to. So here's what's going on, right? Like, there's some like control stuff playing out here. And I don't know if she's aware, and I know she is at some level, because she has told me, like, he wants my son, but I'm like, but it's not, like, he has his own life, like, he shouldn't have to be, but this is the way you treated him, this is why he's not showing up, right? So, but I think at the core of it, there's some resentment of something going on, things that are not being discussed, right? But here I am, literally, physically in the land, in the middle of all of it, right? Like, and so, what the heck? But this is coming up, right? This is what I'm saying. Like, so sometimes you're not, when you're trying to unravel these things in your mind, like, where are these programs coming from? How is this all playing out in my field? You will be shown, at least I am shown in my daily life. I take everything that happens in my daily life as a part of the code, right? So why did I run into him and he just randomly kind of said, I'm her power of attorney, right? Why did I randomly have that video come up that talks about neighbors manipulating each other, right? And then why, like, so it all fit into this puzzle to show me the greater image and picture of what's going on, right? That we are all manipulating each other to some degree to get what we need, and we do really need these needs met, but we're not totally open, right? And this comes back to the source, right? Which is the mother. Which, this is how we learn to manipulate people, because we don't feel we have the capacity to come in and tell her what's up, right? It's really hard to come to your mother because these patterns, the program is so ingrained, right? And because we're a child, especially, a son or daughter, it's like, I don't want to be the cause of her crying. Like, that makes me feel awful. I don't want to do that, right? It's like, it's really hard to heal that code for them. But this is the crux of everything, right? Like, this is how we learn now, why do we show up the way we do in the world, right? Well, I avoid, like, I totally avoid being stuck in these situations. So I pull back, right? Like I said, I have this total aversion to asking for help because of this, like what I learned here, how it plays out for me. Now, everyone's mother code distortion is going to play out differently, right? But this is where you start to see, what are the patterns of behaviors that I do in relation to when the mother calls, right? Like, so mine is to avoid and to isolate and to totally hide. And now I've learned, okay, the reason I do that, which then starts to affect the rest of my life and my relationships, right? It's like not a million things as a result of that. So when you come back to the root and see, what are you doing? Okay, it's fine in that situation. Perhaps that's the best way we know how to handle it. But to look at the other areas of your life now, where do you repeat this, right? Like, where do you try to come in? So in my instance, right, like with my neighbor, it's like, I see a need and I want to help. But then suddenly, before I know it, I'm pulled into it, right? And I'm now being manipulated by not just one thing, it's this plus this whole web dynamic, right? So this is why it's so hard to see the programs. It's not just one-to-one linear, this is what it is. Someone's saying this and they're trying to get this. No, oftentimes it's everyone around you playing this out, playing these roles, right? And this is where we have to step back and allow the answers to come in, right? So literally, I'm like, bring me what I need to know, light. Like, I trust in light, I trust in source. I know this is what's inside of me. And I would say I didn't start out that way. There was some weird random thing that happened that alerted me to like, wait, something is going on here. And it's not like I even said, let me experiment, let me figure out this. It's just the natural way that I live my life, is to question, to analyze, to wonder. And sometimes people get really annoyed with me too, right? Because they'll be having an issue and they're like, well, this person, and I'm like, well, is that really what's going on though? Like, are you and then they think I'm questioning their personality or their traits or their behavior or who they are, right? And that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, are you seeing the web of deception that you keep going into? And I know it's best of intention, right? You want to go in, just like I want to cut the grass, I want to help, I so want to be of service in a way where I'm not tied to the fucking sticky web, right? But it's almost impossible to go in and just do a favor and have that be it, right? Because humans are not trained to be that way. And again, I'm speaking, yes, at a physical, material level, but energetically, this is the system we are a part of. This is the system we're tied to through the land, right? So in many ways, yes, there are rules, laws, customs that we need to abide to because we're in this physical form, right? But our energy is not subject to the laws of the land, right? We are free to see the codes and the patterns that are playing out in the physical, and energetically, we can start to disassemble and deconstruct that so that we start to approach these things in different ways, right? And it's generally not through attacking it through the physical and saying, hey, guess what I heard over, that's not the way to do it. I don't quite have the answer to the yard saga, right? Like, I don't know yet, but I know something will come up to assist me to resolve this or find a gracious way of resolving the entrapment, the manipulation that I'm feeling I'm now caught in, right? So I hope this is all. I know, like I said, it's different parts and pieces, and maybe some fit for you, and maybe you're understanding some of it, and maybe not, and that's totally okay. But essentially the crux of this distorted divine mother, how we learned to survive, right? These are our survival mechanisms that we are now playing out in daily life. So to start to understand this is where it came from. It's not the mother's fault, right? She's just in that energy. The energy comes through her. This is what she learned. This is what she was tied to. We're not crucifying anyone, right? But you can use this relationship to understand how it plays out in your own field, how you get caught on a day-to-day basis through the neighbor's yard, right? Like, same mother distortion, trying to come in and help, right? Like helping those we love that we see suffering. And yet that is not our job, and that's not what we're here to do, is to, again, speaking energetically, to dive into someone else's problems and fix it for them. Because when we do that, see what happens here, instead of the mother having to face her own distortion through her wounding to attune to the code, the original code, right, of source light alignment, which is within stillness, within the ability to see one's own patterns and distortions and how one is affecting those around them as a result of that. When we keep coming in and trying to help and save and playing this out, this keeps them, it allows them not to come into their own true divine mother tone, right? So we're actually enabling this. We think we're helping. It looks like we're helping. But guess what? As soon as that problem is resolved, something comes up. It's going to be something else. It's going to be, the front yard. Now it's the snow. Then it's what, not saying, right? But with our own mothers, we know this, right? It's always, there's always something. It keeps coming back. And the reason that keeps coming back is because, especially when a mother has children now, right? It's not just the one child. There's multiple children to go around and to siphon from and to do all these things because she hasn't healed. And again, I'm not picking on mothers, but I'm talking about the energetic code, and we can talk about it, understand it through the mother-child relationship. Okay, so this is for anyone. When we come in and we try to solve their problem by showing up here, they actually don't, or maybe they don't even have the capacity, right? That's not true. Everyone has the capacity to attune to the light, but we are so ingrained in these patterns that it feels really scary. It's like, this is my religion. This is what my religion is. Suddenly you're going to tell me that religion isn't true. And I've built all my trust and faith in this religion. Well, now what do I do, right? Like, that's essentially the equivalent of it, is taking away what someone believes in, what has held them up in a very not true way, but that's what they believe in, right? So to come in and to try to constantly fix this, we can't. The only one that can fix this is that person. We are the only ones who can come in and see the insanity of our mental patterning and ask to call the light in to heal this, right? Like, I have to sit, like I said, my life is basically my work. Everything that happens, I take as a lesson, a sign. I put all of these lessons, things that happen in my daily life, together to understand this is how energy is working underneath all of this. So I had a moment today too where I actually got pulled over, and I haven't gotten pulled over since I think way before I even had kids, right? So, which is really interesting. And when it happened, I was like, wait, what the heck am I getting pulled over for? Because I was like, I don't know. I don't think it can be for speeding, because there was a car in front of me, there was a car to the side of me, there was a car behind me, and somehow, how did I get pulled? Like, I must have something, right? But the cop was coming from the opposite direction, and it was just really again, a message, right? And whatever, not a big deal. It was just a warning, but in the area that I was driving through, right, it's like the speed limits change, and I just is it 40, is it 35? And there's a big difference if you're going 45, if the speed limit is 35, and that's exactly what happened. So, but there was this area, I guess, around the school or something. Anyway, and I thought, but as I drove off, I was thinking, how did I get singled out when there were other cars? And I thought, well, maybe I was accelerating within that group, and that's what happened, And I thought, well, isn't that funny? When you speaking of soul groups, right? And we come in connected to these energies that we don't even realize we're tied to a lot of times. And this is often what causes this depression and pull down, even when we're trying to pull up out of it. So oftentimes we feel like we're spinning our wheels and we're trying to move forward. We're trying to make our life better, right? And we're like, why is this? So part of it is, yes, the programs that you still need to clear out, your old patterns of how you deal with things, because it's been electrically encoded into your brain, therefore into your body, therefore things will trigger you visually, physically, before you don't even realize it's happening, right? You start playing this thing out. People are worried about becoming AI. It's but we already are. We're already playing out these programs that are inside of us. But when we start to pull ahead, it's energetically we start to get noticed, right? And so it's why I'm trying so hard here? Why is all this coming up now? Well, that's because you're trying to actually release out of the pull and the control, right? It's we know our mothers want the best for us, and yet there's that thing in the back of our mind where we're yeah, but every time I say I'm going off to do what I really want to do, or I'm happy, or I'm it's they find a way to bring it back down into this negativity. It's really weird. And then again, it triggers this shame and this guilt, and I'm an awful person because how can I possibly feel like this about my mother? Right? But again, we're talking about the underlying energy. It's not the person. It's also not the souls, right? All these souls that we don't even realize we're connected to do not know what they're doing. But they're grasping for air also. But how do we help them if we stay down here with them? We cannot. And this has become so clear to me. Even with my own work, it's I have to draw this line. I have to say no. Sometimes it's I also have to make time for my own self to continue moving forward, even if people aren't understanding what I'm doing, what I'm speaking about, where I'm going. I used to think, okay, I will know, like, if people are responding to a video I make, like, that's the right content to put out, right? But I'm realizing that's not actually true, and that's keeping me from allowing myself to move forward. And in those times where I just let all of that go and I just put out what I am feeling deep within inside of me, right? And just don't think about what people are going to think when they're looking at you, or the way you're moving, or the way you're whatever, you know? Or if you think it doesn't make any sense. Like, I have to continue to push forward in that way, as I've said, because we are here to be the light, which is something totally different than anyone here has been doing so far, right? So we're looking for that external validation to say, hey, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing. Look at the subscribers you're getting, look at the likes you're getting, look at how people are responding to your work, like you're drawing people to you. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to feel isolated, you're going to feel alone, you're going to feel like you're doing it wrong, and that actually means you're doing it right, because you're stepping out of the herd, you're moving forward out of the crowd, because you are here to lead the way and do it differently, right? So, which, if we are so used to being validated by helping those who are in pain and suffering, this is going to be really uncomfortable, because we have to step away from that and focus on ourselves, releasing our own patterns and programs. And this is when we start to feel better, right? Not when we are saying, okay, well, when I get this external material thing, then I can do what I do, and then I'll get on mission, and then I'll feel free to do, like, that's not true, because the path does not appear until you actually place yourself on it, right? It's like that next stone does not light up until you step on the stone in front of it, right? And sometimes those stones are actually crocodile heads, right? Like, we don't know until we take the step, but that just helps us figure it out, right? So everything in your life is happening to show you. If you feel like you are so mired in pain and suffering, it's not the universe trying to kill you, I promise. It's the universe trying to help you see your patterns. Yes, you keep trying, you keep putting in more effort to this one thing because this is what it's got to be, right? But what if it's not? And I'll tell you it's not, because the goal is to let all of that go and to come inside and to see how you have been so electrically programmed to have these impulses, because they are based on this relationship that you were born into. You have to dismantle this mother code, this mother relationship, and it's going to feel like your whole world is falling apart. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because you're breaking out of the code. You're going to feel alone, you're going to feel isolated, but then you're going to start to feel totally at peace, because you can see this shit playing out around you now. You can see how you're being manipulated. You can see how you fell into it in the past. You can see how where you were exerting so much effort was just futile, right? And like, this is the gift. This is the excitement that starts to happen as you actually see. And I don't mean like, okay, like in the Matrix, you actually see the codes floating. But it starts to feel that way, like you start to feel like you're in on some kind of amazing secret that no one else has figured out around you, you know? Someone said to me the other day, like, oh my God, you sounded so good the other day. Like, what is your secret? I'm like, well, I don't know. But I think it's because I'm actually seeing the fucking code dissolve right before my eyes, you know? Like, but this is the way that I've had to do it. And I've gotten a lot of flack from people. Like, you're too much in the mind. You analyze too much. You spend too much time doing da-da-da-da. Yeah, well, look at this shit, mother effer, you know, like, but now it has served me. And the only reason I can sit here and tell you this and feel so confident in this is because I've gone through it. And the only reason I've gone through it is because I did everything contrary to what I was being told, right? Because the shit I was being told to do wasn't fucking working. And people would tell me like, oh, you just call in the light and you just do this and it will come and it will happen. And I was like, but it's not happening. My life feels like shit. I'm trying to keep it together. Like, what the hell is going on, right? It's like there are so many roads to go down to, or to go down through. This is okay. Something else I forgot I was going to mention. I don't know that I even want to get into this. But there are many, many routes in what I call the spiritual realm. And spiritual realm to me is like, I don't even want to be a part of that, because I don't, like, that's not, there's so many constructs, right? Just like religion, spirituality has developed all these formulas and matrices of like how to ascend and get out of the whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is anymore. I'll just call it like that 12D Christic consciousness, which is basically a lot of bullshit to make you think that, okay, keep doing these steps and you will get out of this entrapment. It's not steps. There aren't, like, why are you climbing steps and doing things like through a, like some routine pattern to get out? It's seeing the fucking pattern that's already in there, right? And stepping back from it, not getting into some new pattern that you think is taking you somewhere, which is just keeping you, it's basically absolving you from looking at your own shit again. Oh, the light will come in and fix it. No, no. It's electrical impulses in your brain, these patterns that have been created that you have to look at. The light comes in when you're like, hey, I'm unhappy with this shit. Life should be better than this. But do we have the courage to say that, right? Because it's like the mother. But if I admit that I'm unhappy, now it means my life is a lie. That's why most people don't want to look at it, right? It's not that your life has been a lie. It's that we live in a realm that is programmed. We are taught to be programmed. We are taught that to assimilate to the programs will best serve us. And so if you have high light capacity, though, you have lived your life wondering why you can't be like everyone else. How come these people can just go off and do what they're doing and shit works out for them, and I keep trying my damnedest and I just keep feeling worse? Because you're not supposed to be following that code. You're not supposed to be following that program. And yet those are the very people who keep pulling you in and tricking you into thinking there's something wrong with you because you can assimilate to the code. So you keep spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, right? You don't have to be in the spiritual realm attaching to this 12D bullshit to still be feeling the effect of being in some false trying to resolve this, right? But are you deceiving yourself? It's like this magician energy, which is so good at moving energy around, right? That's the problem with so many of us. We are so highly attuned to the light. We have this capacity to move energy around. But what happens is we move it around so that we don't see it. And we are able to avoid it in that way, right? We're able to like go into all these places and assimilate to all these different kinds of groups of people and to be involved in so many different things and have so many interests. And we think we have such a full life in that way. But what we're really doing is we're hiding our true light, right? And so this is why we do this, because we're like, well, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me come back over here to this interest or that club or like this hobby that I have, right? It's not that. Start to see the code in your life. Start to look at what's happening in your daily life, the weird messages, the weird YouTube video that fucking pops up. You have no idea why. Like, there's always something there. You're like, why am I not hearing my intuition? You're getting it. You're just discrediting it because it doesn't match what the rest of the world is telling you. I swear, I promise you, you're hearing it correctly. But your follow through is based on the patterns and who you think you should show up as and what you think you understand about karma and being in the world and serving the community and carrying the burden of the world, right? But all that is going. And if we're feeling really bad right now and we feel like we're suffering, it's because we've not quite had that opportunity yet to have that code cracked, you know? It's like, but ask to see it. We have to, and this is the challenging part, right? It's not about, oh God, it's so hard to get these programs out. What is so challenging is that we don't trust that the light will come in to help us see this, because we feel like we've trusted the light before, right? But we were deceived about how the light actually even works, right? It's like we have it all inside of us. We have the answers. We have the wisdom. There's just all this shit that has been programmed into us that we've been running and trying to satisfy the programs day after day rather than looking at the truth of what we're feeling, right? Because there is nothing out there that validates the truth of what we're feeling. You're like, what if I just dropped all of this and left it? You can't do, that's when the nightmares and you can't fall asleep and you wake up in the morning and you feel like absolute horseshit, right? You can't do that. What if you do that? Like life, how could you possibly, right? They're going to come after you, like these entities, these governments, these systems, whatever. They're going to find you, the fear, and you get so worked up, your blood pressure, like all this stuff, right? Like that's the system. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. I hope some of this made sense and was useful. Yes, but really this is what's happening. It's the mother of all codes, right, is coming to the surface here. I always do this. I always have like a PS. One of the things I have noticed that I am really feeling in relation to not just the souls and people we are connected to starting to feel that energy much more strongly through our fields, right? But also because the land is starting to shed the distortion of these mother codes, right? There's a lot that we're picking up on. I did mention a bit of this, like trafficking of the human form, right? But it's coming up very strong. And in ways where I know we talk about like, okay, human trafficking, child pornography, all this kind of stuff, like as these very kind of like different sectors, but there's something much more insidious and intense about these energies, where we're not really understanding that we are all trafficked as humans, right? So like, I'm just saying that like, if you're feeling this weird, like nauseating kind of, to me, it's like this really kind of sickly brown, muddy tone, like that I've really been feeling over the last couple of days. Like this is what's happening. Like this is all kind of coming to the surface, in a huge way. So, just keep that in mind, right? Like it's not you, you're, moving forward and you're figuring it out, but we do feel these things starting to pull down and we think, oh God, what, how do I've backtracked, I've backslid, something like this. And it's feel that, acknowledge it, but no, it's not you. It's never us in the light, in our origin, in who we are, right? It's the stuff of this world. And we've all misidentified as being the stuff and the shit of this world, right? Because that's what we were trained to do. That's how you get into this realm. You have to accept that, but not anymore. Like we can break free out of it. So, okay, I will leave this here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care. We'll talk soon.